Hi, I'm going to record the first 10 minutes or so of the Ron Paul Liberty Report for August 31st because I think it's very important.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Chris Rossini, our co-host. Chris, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Great to be with you, Dr. Paul.
Good. I thought it would be very appropriate to talk about a big event that's ongoing. A lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people have their different interpretations. We have ours, and that has to do with the economy. Of course, the other big issue that's going on is the coronavirus. And lo and behold, there's a connection there, and everybody now is trying to figure out who to blame. They're blaming the virus basically for this because it's costing a lot of money, and there were a lot of very negative statistics since then. Take, for instance, the GDP. I want to put up a chart here about the GDP because it's so dramatic. Look at that last part of that chart there, that straight red line down. It's a record breaker, and it tells you, they talk about things falling off a cliff. I think that's a pretty good description for that. The market and the economy has fell off a cliff. Again, stock market's doing great. The social medias are doing fantastically. So certain segments are benefiting, and I'm sure the banks are going to get bailed out. And if you happen to be in the business of making a vaccine, you might be able to make a lot of money. And so it's where you look, because you can look and see the unemployment rates are very high, and the food lines are getting longer, and there's a lot of unemployment and a lot of spending. Just think of what's happened since people got attention about the coronavirus, because it was very easy to stir up emotions and say this is the end of the world and we have to sacrifice our liberties, we have to give up all local control. Anybody who disagrees with the official word about how to treat the virus, they are in big trouble. Like Dr. Simone, the woman doctor who leads the American Doctors Group, and she is called Americans Frontline Doctors. And she and others had this press conference. She was fantastic, and she knew the issues, but she didn't fit into Fauci and Gates' scenario. So she got into big trouble. So if you define, there are no laws against what she said. She had freedom of speech, and you can't even introduce that notion about the First Amendment there. She was out and giving a speech. But what is outrageous is that she got fired. And that does raise questions because she was working in a hospital which gets the money from the government. But she was fired. And Twitter cut her off. And she had the nerve to disagree with the conventional wisdom of Fauci. And of course, you don't do that, because in order to have created this hysteria worldwide, and that is the big one. You see that line dropping off the cliff. Well, the same thing happened to common sense. Common sense dropped off a cliff too, and the whole world has joined in. At the same time, they have very, very little proof of what they're talking about, and the dependency of tests, the argument for vaccines, whether it's a good argument or bad argument, because it's complicated, it's medical, and there definitely needs a discussion. But this whole idea, the science has settled this, the politicians have settled it, the doctors aren't allowed to talk about it, only the medical people who agree with the authorities, who agree with the establishment, who agree with the deep state, because we have to scare people. And I'll mention this briefly, but we'll get into this a little bit more, because I've talked about it before, is this whole thing of coronavirus pandemic. Yes, there's a serious problem out there, but as serious as it was, I think it's been made much worse. And as the dust begins to settle, more damage, more lives lost, and more long-term detriment has come from the shutdown, and that is the big problem. But anyway, Chris, I know you already know this, that when we talk this way and try to get a little bit of a balance on this and not get hysterical about it, then they say, well, we don't care. Well, we do care. That's why we're looking for the truth, and we're going to keep working at it. And that's why today I'm going to have you help us explain about exactly how this GDP goes and drops off and what all that means. Go ahead, Chris.
That's right, Dr. Paul, and it really isn't a surprise. I mean, if you lock down the economy, what else could you expect? Well, it was bad, the worst since 1947. And it's a shame because, at the beginning of all this, the Ron Paul Liberty Report, we were saying, that government is not a problem solver. It multiplies problems. We have this, COVID is a real problem. However, the last thing you need is for government to get involved, and they dove in head first. And look what they've done. They didn't fix COVID, they fixed nothing, but they added 40 to 50 million unemployed. This week, Daniel pointed out that now suicides and drug overdoses are higher than the COVID death rate. And yesterday I saw on Zero Hedge that domestic violence has more than doubled during these lockdowns. So again, problem, and then it just multiplies. And I also want to mention this because we're starting to see it more and more, is, America's turning into like an East Germany where people are snitching on one another and turning on one another over arbitrary things like how far you're standing apart or whether or not you're putting a mask on your face. So again, the worst words that you can hear is, I'm from government and I'm here to help, and they always do the exact opposite.
That's right.
Well, I'm going to stop it there, but I knew this was a stink bomb when it started back in March. I'm 77 years old, and I've had the Hong Kong flu, which killed far more people than this one has thus far. And that was back when they weren't, tampering with the data. And there's so much evidence that these numbers have been inflated, who knows how many multiples. So I recognized it back, when I had the Hong Kong and then I had the London flu and the swine flu. There was no reaction like this. It didn't happen. So there's something underlying this whole thing to bring it about. But I just wanted to share that part of it. And I hope you all have a good day. Thank you.